Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening. First, I'd like to welcome all of you joining us here in person at the beautiful Mercantile Library, as well as welcoming our online audience for what I'm sure will be another engaging and informative Urban Consulate conversation. I am Tim Barr. I'm your host for the Urban Consulate Cincinnati, and I'm joined by our guests tonight who have a wealth of knowledge that I'm really excited to dig into. But before we do that, I want to invite you all to ask questions and engage in conversation a little bit later on in the evening, okay? Before we dive in, I would just want to take a moment to recognize the very interesting times we are all living in. I think for me, it seems like over the past couple weeks, each week there's been something that pops up that affects our world, the world that we're living in, and we're reminded of our collective and even blatant disregard for issues that already exist. And either way, I think it can feel really disheartening at times. That being said, I want everyone to know that here at the Urban Consulate, it is our mission to bring people together in community to discuss what's really going on, right? And every conversation may not necessarily end with an immediate solution, but it's our hope in these conversations that we as a community take inventory and assess where we are, where we've come from, and where we're going, and ultimately have the conversation and ask ourselves, what could this really look like if we get this right? I was prompted to have the conversation this evening about Black tech and equity specifically because it's important to me, but more important to the work that I do every day in working with entrepreneurs. What I know from my own life is that you can't teach material that you haven't learned, and future generations are really depending on us, meaning the people living here right now, to learn these things now so that we can then teach them to future generations later on. So I'm sure as it relates to tech, we can all relate to a story to where, you know, the youth or some youth has had to teach an elderly person in the family how to operate a phone, a tablet, or maybe even a computer, right? So I know my frustration in even talking with my own grandmother and how to operate her iPhone from time to time, right? I just recognize that, you know, that's a barrier for a lot of people, and I can't help but think, how different would those conversations be now if there was some way to prepare that generation for the technology that was soon to come? My goal in tonight's conversation isn't to hand over necessarily a master's course in tech or, you know, to inform you guys of all the things that there are in tech, but to simply inform and enlighten and possibly even lift the weight of the shoulders of anyone feeling uncomfortable or uninformed in the world of tech. So, the ultimate point that I'm making, though, is that the industries and occupations associated with tech are rapidly evolving. And I want to be very clear in saying that tech is no single industry. Rather, new technology has transformed industries like telecommunications and manufacturing and the functions of numerous occupations, whether it be clerical work or even scientific research. I care deeply about the city of Cincinnati and the people, and I don't want to see this community of Cincinnati be left behind on something that's crafting the future, literally, as we're scrolling through our social media feeds, right? So after hearing from our guests tonight during our brief Q&A, I want to make sure that we're honoring their time and yours. So we're going to break out into smaller groups just so we can integrate a lot of the information that we've discussed, maybe even shared and learned here over the evening. What I'm hoping we could do is take these actionable steps and then apply them to what we're going to do as a community after we leave this room. There's also going to be a portion where we open up and share because it's always important to hear what others are doing and also have that element of social accountability. So now that we've got that established, I'm honored and excited to introduce our phenomenal guests for the evening.
I'm nervous that you're going to read my bio.
No, it's okay. Well,
okay,
correct
good.
me where I'm wrong, okay?
Thank you. Great.
First, we have the lovely Candice Matthews Brackeen, who is the founder and CEO of Lightship Foundation, the Cincinnati-based portfolio service firm, including accelerators Hillman and New Me, and a venture capital fund, where she serves as the managing partner. As CEO of Hillman, the first accelerator in the Midwest to provide support exclusively to this demographic, Candice has influenced state policy around economic inclusion, in addition to establishing meaningful partners with companies like Procter & Gamble, Kroger, and Chase, in support of Hillman's work specifically. Candice has over 15 years of entrepreneur experience, including co-founding Hello Parent, a national safety technology partner of the Brady campaign to reduce gun violence, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. She later founded the Cincinnati chapter of the Black Founders Network, BFN, to address the need for increased diversity and inclusion efforts in local entrepreneurial ecosystems. Candice serves on the board of the Cincinnati Squash Academy and has recently served on the board of directors at the Beach Acres Parenting Center, where she chaired the Parenting Innovation and Technology Committee. She also holds a director seat on the board of Justin T. Wright Suicide Prevention Initiative and Depression Research Foundation. Wow, Candice, you're very busy. Candice is a recipient of both the Venture Ohio Catalyst of the Year and the Cincinnati Business Courier Women Who Mean Business Awards. Candice maintains a busy fundraising schedule and works diligently to identify and develop tech startups. She holds a BA in economics from the University of Cincinnati and was a Hewitt-Kotz Fellow. Candice enjoys music and spending time with her sons. Thank you for being here, Candice.
Thanks for reading that.
Absolutely. So next we have the great Chandler Malone. Chandler is a 3-time entrepreneur who is now building Bootup and investing in early-stage companies through Underground Ventures. His journey began as a college student building an events business that hosted shows for Billboard Top 10 artists, including the Chainsmokers, before launching his first software company. The Moves, which he exited in 2019, Chandler is passionate about helping underrepresented entrepreneurs and using technology to improve their quality of life. Chandler served as an investor in resident at Washington University in St. Louis and a board member at Urban Coders Guild. Thank you for being here, Chandler. So awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So yeah, we recognize summer is a very busy time for people, so we appreciate you guys making the time to visit us here, right? So diving into the conversation, just going right into it, what I think would be helpful is tell us how you got here. You know, can you share with us maybe an aha moment in your journey? What made you feel like, you know, this is your space to be in black tech, and what keeps you going?
Maybe I'll start?
Yeah.
For me, my aha moment was as I had raised some venture capital for the company that you mentioned, and I ran out. And around the same time, a report came out called Project Diane. So Project Diane basically did a scan or a census of black women in tech to see how they were faring amongst other venture capital-backed companies. And what they found was that a very, very insignificant percentage of black women were getting any venture capital funding. And I started to kind of compare myself to my peers and realize that that may have been my issue. And so I decided to fix that thing for this city.
Okay.
And that's where the idea for Hillman, which then became the Lightship Foundation. So I started a meetup group, which you mentioned, Black Founders Network. There were 11 of us that started at Igby's down just a couple blocks over. And it was the 11 of us that started that group. We met monthly, had cheese and wine, pizza and beer every month. And it was that energy that allowed us to grow into the organization we are today.
I will say for myself, my pathway was not nearly as intentional, but I feel like I was just super blessed to be kind of like dropped in some of the right situations really early in life. And so when I was 19, 2 things happened that same year. One, so I majored in American Culture Studies in undergrad, right? Nothing in business, nothing in engineering, but I took a class where I had to write 2 25-page research papers. One on the cultural and societal impact of Snapchat, the other on the cultural and societal impact of Square, right? And so at this point, I'm a teenager, right? I'm using Snapchat pretty heavily. The guy who founded Snapchat was still in his 20s. And so I saw how big that was and even just how big it was in my life. And I'm like, this person's not that much older than me. And then with Square, the individual who actually built the Square reader, that you plug into the phone and the iPad, he was a professor at my university as well. So again, right, there was this proximity. And so I was able to see just the scale at which these things grew and how many people's lives they touched, and going into the barbershop not having to bring cash, you know what I mean? And it's I see this in my real life. And at that same time, I started my first business with a friend. We were really just trying to make a little bit of extra money and get good seats the concerts that were in town. But it was something that grew a lot. And so, between our sophomore and junior year, we both brought home more than, any first year job would have brought us out of college. And so it was okay, if I can mix this opportunity that entrepreneurship provides in terms of not necessarily having a cap on what you can do, what you can create, what you can have for yourself with this technology piece that just like creates massive scale and massive impact, then what I'll be able to do with my life, like I couldn't even fathom, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to kind of imagine it. And so that was really like my start. And I feel like, since then have been able to just be around great people like Candice from, when I was in college, to others to kind of just help nurture and like grow that journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about both of you all's stories is that it seems there's an element of representation in both of those, right? Like to where you saw the opportunity, one, to be represented, or you saw the lack of representation there, right? So it kind of motivated you to get involved and to be in the space and to be, the face that you wanted to see there. So that's amazing. And I think it's important to let other people know that, because Candice, we were talking earlier, but you're like, you have to start from somewhere, right? Like even if it's a small space, you start somewhere and build upon that. So that's great. I'd say it's pretty evident, but maybe not everyone knows this. But for me, because I work in the entrepreneur space, what I know is that in this space, it is mostly dominated, of course, by white male, majority white male, right? Due to lack of variety of resources, whether it's access to capital, access to knowledge, access to space, whatever it may be. But the U.S. Equal Opportunity Employment Commission reports that less than 10% of the tech jobs across the U.S. are represented by black people. That being the case, do you believe tech is for everyone, or can tech be for everyone? And what advice could you offer to someone that's interested in tech but can't really find an in or even identify an in?
So I would say definitely tech is for everyone. If you look at the wealth gap in this country, right, like it hasn't gotten better for us literally since the 60s, right? Yeah. And there is no other vehicle that provides the level of upward mobility and trajectory from a salaried career path the way that tech does, and there is nothing on the face of this earth that provides the upside.
Say that part again, right? Like there's nothing that provides that upward mobility trajectory, right? Like tech does.
Correct, right? Yeah. Even just talking about what we do, in my company, we help individuals get their first jobs in tech regardless of their academic background. So around 50% of our candidates don't have college degrees. These folks are stepping into their first job making over $70K, which for a lot of them is the most that they've made in their lives, and are on a very direct pathway to get to six figures within 2 to 3 years, realistically, not selling folks dreams. Wow. And this is very early career. And these are the opportunities that are available to everyone, right? Not just your, super exceptional, crazy high performers. But then, you think about how wealth is really built, right? And it's through entrepreneurship. And there is no other type of entrepreneurship where someone can build a multi-billion-dollar business in 5 years, right? We can look at real estate, we can look at any other, vector, and those are great opportunities for us, but nothing provides that upside that tech does. So, yeah. It's got to be for us. So.
Yeah, you can get into tech and build your own company, or you can get a tech job.
Sure.
Right? So you can work at a startup, you work at a corporation. There are plenty of ways to kind of find your way in.
Yeah.
I think you have to be self-motivated. I think that's super important no matter where you're going.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not for you. Maybe just a stable, steady corporate job might be your thing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But there's a path here for everyone.
Absolutely.
We talk quite a bit about, there aren't a lot of black people in tech. Sure, that's fine. And that's because 98.7% of all assets managed in the United States are managed by white males. And so until we can flip that paradigm, we're going to continue to have an issue. But black-led companies, minority-led companies just in general, generate revenue. Yeah. And they generate revenue earlier because they don't have anyone coming to save them.
Mic drop right there.
That's
huge. No.
What's really fun sitting up here is, so we invested in Chandler's company, and it's fun to sit here and listen to him, because when you make investments not only in your own team members but into other companies, you invest in someone who's smarter than you. So I'm sitting here listening to his greatness tonight.
Right. And that's great to see, right? So as an investor, right? So let's kind of talk about that. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, but as an investor, what is it that you're looking for in these companies, to pull the trigger to make that investment, right? And what is honestly the bottom line that you're hoping to receive as an investor as you look at these minority-owned companies, because what I also recognize from my work is that minority-owned companies aren't afforded the same mistakes, if you will, or aren't allowed to make those same mistakes when asking for venture and everything like that. It's like you got to make every dollar count, before they can even sign the deal. So, what is it that you as an investor look for in these minority-owned companies?
Yeah, every investor has a different thesis. For us, we invest in the heartland, so we've got a geographic focus. We typically aren't investing in San Francisco, New York, and Boston.
Right.
We have a demographic focus. So for us, that's people who are Black, Indigenous, of color, women, LGBTQ, those who have disabilities. So that's our demographic focus. And then we have a sector focus, which is in CPG, so consumer packaged goods and services, e-commerce, sustainability, artificial intelligence, and healthcare. And then we have a stage, so just to break it all the way down. So for us, it's seed stage to Series A, and if we can afford to get into another stage. And we're trying to have about an 8 to 12% ownership percentage in any one company. Okay. And when we look at a company, we're looking for something leading edge. We're looking for something that has a first mover advantage. We're looking to make certain that that founder is incredible. Yeah. And folks say this all the time, like, are they willing to run through a brick wall to make something happen? And can they build a team? Yeah. And can they fundraise or generate revenue? And are they willing to be open and honest about the things that they don't know?
Yes.
And there's a lot of other things in there.
Sure.
But that's the beginning portions of it.
Absolutely.
And if I may, I'd love to maybe kind of flip the question and say like what entrepreneurs should be looking for in an investor as well. And I think that's an important piece to talk about as well, because I think especially for a lot of Black founders, you're just like, oh, I'll take money from anyone who will give it to me. But at the end of the day, yes, you can't do that. And then also you've got to go into each of these meetings like understanding like you are the upside, right? Like you are the opportunity that's being looked for, and like you have to carry yourself as such, Absolutely. And so I'll say,
and he's really good, so he can do this.
But I mean, I'll say, right, for myself through my fundraising experience, what I really looked for was people who cared about me, people who believed in me, and then the business stuff was secondary, right? Like they understood what they were doing, like they believed in what we were doing, but they were there for me. Because when you're going and building a company from scratch, that is a difficult journey, like a very difficult journey. And you just start to think about just all of the variations that life can throw at you on top of the difficulty of trying to build something from scratch. You have to have people in your corner that not only support you, but understand the journey that you're going on. And, from an investor perspective, if you have someone who's really in your corner, right, they've done this with many other founders before, so they know what your experience is like and can be there for you to kind of look around the corners and, give you the pat on the back, when you need some of those things, so.
No, absolutely. And that's one thing I saw that was very important to the entrepreneur journey as well, is like giving the back end of your story, right? And of course, we're here, investors want to hear about the business and everything like that, but investors are people too, right? So they care about the person that's behind the business and the team that you're building. I mean, Candice, to your point earlier, what I heard you mention is, essentially not everyone can be a founder, right? And that's good, but, founders need people to be on a team that is helping build a successful company and everything like that as well. So awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So dialing it back a little bit to the piece that you kind of mentioned around, educating people in tech that don't have degrees and everything like that. Do you feel like, education is the only missing element from, say, your average person's tech experience? And then what other elements can be a value add to that experience?
Yeah, no, so I would say education is definitely not the only missing piece. I think the first missing piece is just exposure to the significance of the opportunity. Sure. Right? Because I'll say, right, for myself, I made a point to say I didn't study business, I didn't study engineering, right? Absolutely. So like the things that I studied in school really did not have much to do with tech, but I saw the size of the opportunity just through a few papers that I had to write. Yeah. And I think when people see the size of an opportunity, that's enough to get you motivated to then go find the education, because, I mean, it's 2022, right? It's also technology, right? And so of any sector where you can find the educational resources, online and on your own, it's tech more than any.
Tech, yeah.
But people need to understand like why first, and I think even for us, right, like my job now is to help people get into tech. And there are plenty of people who are very close to me in my life who this would be a great opportunity for them. Yeah. And it's not something that has been super compelling because they don't understand the magnitude of the opportunity, right? And so I think that is honestly the most important piece. The education is getting more accessible, more democratized, every day.
Yeah.
But if folks can know what they can do, what they can be, who they can be, what they can build,
Yeah.
I think that's the most important piece.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, in what other ways do you see that? Like, how do you bring people to that point? I mean, of course, in the work that you're doing with Boot Up, but like, in what other ways as a community, like, how can we get people to that point to see the opportunity that's there, right?
Yeah. I mean, so obviously, I think events like this,
Yeah, okay.
are really great. And I think one of the things that, the Lightship team and Candice has been great at, here and, also in Tulsa and other places, right, is being able to do these types of events that build community where, these Workflow Wednesday events, some folks work in tech. Everybody doesn't work in tech. These are just people who are curious and like want to build community with one another. And it's like all of a sudden you're talking to Candice and, there's not too many black women that have been in the Wall Street Journal, right? You know what I'm saying? And so as an individual, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, I've just stepped into this new room, new space, new realm of opportunity. There's something here that I did not have previously,
Yeah.
And so I think being able to actually like be in community with people is like the most important, like most priceless thing.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of ways to get into tech. And so someone asked earlier, like, what is tech? Like, it's innovation, right? It's a new way of doing something. You described that in the beginning.
Absolutely.
And there are so many different things you can do at a tech company or in a department that works on technical things. So you can work in marketing at a tech company. You could do social media at a tech company. You can be an admin at a tech company. And there
Yeah,
are still
you
great
can.
opportunities with that. Salary at a tech company is typically better than somewhere else, right?
Amen
And
to
so
that.
there are ways to get in, right? We just recently hired an executive assistant, and she came from a law firm. She was at actually another venture capital firm before that, and she wants to learn more about venture capital investing and entrepreneurship.
yes.
Because she's kind of building her own kind of portfolio of things over time so that she can go into something different. And I think that at most tech companies, you have the opportunity to grow in your career really fast because you have to wear all the hats.
Yep.
Right? You got hired for this one thing, but you are doing a lot
other.
of different things all the time.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. No, that's good. And so I love this conversation the way we're going, because as we kind of talk about the opportunity that exists there, I think it's important to kind of dive into the conversation of what tech, what power does it hold essentially for future generations, for kids going through grade schools now. Of course, you mentioned in your experience, you were looking at, the Square app and TikTok and everything like that. But as, of course, we see the world.
Musically. Was it musically?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think it was
Snapchat.
musically
Snapchat?
before,
Okay.
yeah. But as we look at, the world we're living in now and as the world's developing, like, what power is there in tech for future generations? And I say that because the one statistic that I'm kind of like hanging on is that I heard the other day that motor skills in elementary children, and their hand and wrist skills are decreasing because of the use of tech, right? Because of technology, and there's a tablet in front of every kid, whether you're in the grocery store or at the daycare center, but their motor skills are decreasing. And so I think, if we highlight all the good things that are happening in tech, there's also some quite alarming statistics that we should look at as well. And so where's the power in tech for future generations?
Yeah, I would say also a portion of that kind of fine motor loss is because we're not teaching cursive any longer.
Yeah, agreed.
And so we've lost the handwriting skill that we
Okay.
had before. And unfortunately, it also not only causes an issue with fine motor skills, but it also causes an issue with the way the brain is wired relatively early, because you need that process of writing to wire certain things in your brain.
Wow.
So kids are missing out on quite a bit from having tablets at school.
Yeah.
They are learning new things, right? But they are losing some
yeah.
other things, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I mean, my kids know how to fly a drone, right? I can't do that. That's because they've been figuring that all out, early on. And
Sure.
so you can, in the state of Ohio, become a drone pilot at 16, right?
Wow.
So there are new things that they can do as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I'll say, not to go, kind of like too deep into things here, but I feel like, it's just like creatures on this earth, like in humans, like tapping into our divine is like creating, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like having certain technical skills allow you to create in a way that no other skill set allows you to create, right? Like, there's nothing that you can do outside of technology where you can build something and literally every single person in the world who has internet access can touch it.
Yeah.
You know, and so if there's something important to you, there's something that matters to you that you need to get out, all of a sudden you have the ability to touch literally every person in the world.
At the same time, yeah.
And I mean, like, that's priceless. Like, we can talk about how much money can be made from that. We can talk about how empowering that is, but like, there's literally no like monetary value that you can put on that ability to create.
Yeah, absolutely. And so can we talk real quick about, the impact of your individual work and what that means for the future of tech and future generations?
I'm gonna let Chandler go first.
Okay.
Yeah, so we launched our first product last July, and so the end of the month will be coming up on a year here, but in our first 11
congrats.
months, appreciate it. Our first 11 months, we've helped 1,230 people get their first jobs in tech for a little over 88 million in annualized salaries.
Come on, man. That's beautiful.
And of that, 48% of these people don't have college degrees. And so when you start thinking about economic upward mobility for folks, incredibly significant. Another piece, 46% of the folks that we've placed in jobs are women. Right now, only 19% of people who are graduating with computer science degrees from the university system are women. And then 80% of our folks that we've placed are just underrepresented in general in tech. And I'll say that the way that we've done that hasn't been through us necessarily just directly, marketing or, honestly, quite frankly, what a lot of these companies do is pander. We haven't done it through that way, but we've just tried to be able to give people access to a more accessible pathway. Yeah. And when there's a more accessible pathway, you see more representation, and so that's basically what we've been up to.
Absolutely.
What's the question again, Tim?
Yeah.
I'm
Just
sorry.
how your work, how Lightship Foundation, Lightship Capital is impacting future generations in tech.
Oh my goodness. So just a little bit about the foundation. So we launched as a single accelerator here in Cincinnati in 2017, acquired something called New Me Accelerator in 2018, which became our boot camp. So we run now Lightship Foundation that runs accelerators in 3 cities, Cincinnati, Tulsa, and Detroit, expanding to a few others. We run boot camps throughout the country as well. We run an online pitch competition called Twitch Pitch. We've had 8 seasons of that where we've given away prizes of about $25,000 or more over the course of those seasons. We run our own meetup groups monthly or biweekly in certain areas. And then we just recently acquired Black Tech Week that I think we'll talk about a little bit later. But for us, I mean, we're doing all of that on the Lightship Foundation side, but then also have a fund that makes investments. We've invested in 14 companies so far. 60% of those founders are Black, and 70% have a woman on the founding team.
So you guys are funding the future.
We are funding some
Yes,
people,
yes.
yes.
you are.
Who benefits from these private donors and organizations who are supporting our prosperity?
We are going to be to Q&A toward the
a little
end.
bit later on. But hold that question. We'll come back to you later on, okay? Thank you. Awesome. So Candice, I know you kind of mentioned it earlier, you kind of tapped on it, but as we can all see, right, the cost of everything is skyrocketing, right? From gas to groceries to haircuts. I know my haircut's like $20 more than what it was last month. But anyways, one thing that's also recently spiked, and you mentioned it, was tech salaries, right? So can you speak to why you believe tech salaries are, 1, increasing in the way that they are, and then 2, what kind of comes with the cost of acquiring and retaining tech talent?
I mean, everybody's costs are going up, right? I know that we just went through our benefits renewal and everyone's insurance went up by 17%, which was pretty significant. And we've had to kind of work with our employees to make certain that they can capture some of that cost, or we're capturing most of that cost.
Absolutely.
But in the tech field, you have the ability to go after more to make more, to make certain that your team is protected and you can continue to grow the company over time. It's not an easy thing to do, but I mean, Chandler and I were talking before we started, like, we get up in the morning and we try to move a needle every single day, right? And it's got to go up because we've got payroll.
Yeah.
And it's constant. And every tech founder has that thought in their mind every single day is how much payroll do I have in the bank?
Yeah.
Do I have less than 2 weeks? Do I have a year's worth of payroll?
Is that 401k
and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One second, we'll get to your question a little bit later on, okay? And so, Chandler, have you seen that even come into play with companies that you're working with, as you're working with entrepreneurs to try to teach them, different skills within tech? The salary requirements, I guess, is the question, right?
Yeah, so I'll say two things. One, being an early stage founder, the amount of money that you raise to folks outside of the sector sometimes can seem like a huge amount of money. But to this point, it's like, to get talented employees, you're gonna have to pay them well, because that's what the tech sector demands. And so that money that seems like a lot is really not that much. You know what I'm saying? When you start thinking about just years of runway that you have. But I think that, a couple things. Part of the reason why these salaries are going up, right, is like, at the end of the day, everyone is competing for the best talent.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I mean, as the world's getting more expensive to live in, it's like that salary
So is
becomes more
talent.
and more important, you
Yeah.
know? Also, if you just think about the directions the world is going, right? Like, the trucking industry is still here. But at the end of the day, like, we know that they're working on building autonomous 18-wheelers,
Sure,
right?
sure.
And so there are going to need to be more people on the software side to make sure that everything goes right. And so, yes, we may have fewer drivers, but the salaries are going up in the space because that's the direction that our world is moving in.
Absolutely.
And so, I think just in terms of, talking about just like with other entrepreneurs, I'd say that, I feel like in today's world, everyone should have some sort of like tech layer or component to their business. And you don't necessarily have to bring in, 15 engineers, right, to build that out. But I think that, if anyone is trying to build a company, whether it's a tech native business or it's not a tech native business, like, you need to have some sort of online digital technology integration piece to make yourself be efficient and competitive.
Absolutely. Awesome. So you mentioned it just now as we look to the future and, as the world is changing. One thing that I think is also important to point out is cybersecurity, and how people are being protecting themselves, protecting their assets, their information online. But specifically, what I want to talk about is, do you think marginalized or more vulnerable populations fall prey to cybersecurity attacks more often than not? Why or why not?
I would say definitely. And when I think of marginalized, I think of marginalized in a number of different ways, right? Like, it may be marginalized in access to certain pieces of information. It may not necessarily just be marginalized like financially, right?
Sure.
And so, I look at my grandmother, and she's clicked on links on her phone probably 4 or 5 times in the past 2 years,
Yeah.
And it's to the point where it's like, my grandmother has everything that she needs in her life, right? Like,
Sure.
she's good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, the access to this information, right? So I worked at a cybersecurity early stage tech investment firm. So I learned that 98% of hacks aren't people just breaking into your password. They're an action that you're taking that's giving them access to your information, whether it's clicking on a link, whether it's visiting a particular page, whether it's entering your information in somewhere, right? And so for me, when I see stuff that I don't recognize, I just don't touch it ever, because I know that for the most part, I'm not gonna get hacked the other way. I'm gonna get hacked touching something that I don't need to touch. And so, to your piece, like, it's definitely about information, right? And
Yeah.
the folks that don't have access to the information always get hurt the most.
Yeah. So I guess my bigger question is that, so how can we protect ourselves? Is it just an issue of awareness? Like, do you advise everybody to buy like spyware, or is it, is there something that we can do, I think, collectively to make everyone, on the same level more aware of, what cyber attacks are, how to be aware of them, and then of course, protecting the more vulnerable populations. As you mentioned, grandmothers, I'm sure most of us have grandparents or elderly family members who have experienced this as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like the folks that are succeeding in tech, especially in our community, should definitely just have like a lot brighter of a light shine, on them. And you look at some of the most successful Black entrepreneurs in this country, literally ever in this country, but also specifically in tech, they're in the cybersecurity space. You know what I mean? And so it's not like we don't have knowledge, like we don't have wins, like we don't have success stories. It's amplifying them,
Yes.
And so, I think that we look at, and it's not just us, it's like the entire world, right? But like, a lot of times we give a lot of love to entertainers, whether it be, music or cinema, or art, or, whatever the case may be. And those people, yes, they mean a lot to folks in the world because they bring people joy and happiness and escape. But at the same time, I feel like we should be shining a brighter light on these folks in our community that are like building solutions to huge problems,
Yes.
and then taking the profits they've generated from these solutions to huge problems and then reinvesting them, back in our
those same
community.
communities,
And
yeah.
I feel like if that was more of a priority, then some of these just knowledge pieces within tech that, folks who work in the space, may see as common knowledge, that would become just more common knowledge for our community in general because we had more exposure to the sector.
Yes, yes. Chandler, you're speaking perfectly, man, and it's a perfect segue into my next question, because specifically around like highlighting and raising awareness. Candice, my question to you is, as a curator or as the acquirer, of Black Tech Week, right? So let's talk about, let's talk about the kind of opportunity that events like Black Tech Week not only bring to Cincinnati, but that can also bring to other tech and entrepreneurial ecosystems.
Black Tech Week started, I guess now, 7 years ago. This will be its 8th iteration. And it started as a way to allow children in Miami-Dade County to see other people working in tech.
Yeah.
So they were coding, and they would bring in speakers, and those speakers would talk to them. Then they had so many speakers that they decided to start a conference, right? That's really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to expose Cincinnatians, the children of Cincinnati, the kids, the students of Cincinnati, to the best in tech.
Yes.
And also to let our allies or other people in this community see that greatness can come from the Black community in this space.
Absolutely.
Because for many years, we have been a very homogenous tech ecosystem. And we've not invested at the level that we've needed to have outsized wins, which is what most Black tech companies end up having.
Yeah.
And so we just want to be able to share that with Cincinnati. Also, I think it's important that folks see what's going on here, right? Like, I love it here. Are you from here?
Yeah. Dayton, so yes, kind of.
The Cincinnatians may not believe that, but I'm from Toledo originally, but I've been here for a long time, so since the 90s. And so this is my home.
Yeah.
And it's hard to go other places and people think, well, Cincinnati, why are you doing anything there?
Right.
Right? Can't be anything there. But this is, I love it here.
Yeah.
It's the best thing, and I'm excited to bring all of it to the city.
Yeah, no, I love it. And so even in having an event like Black Tech Week, are there other efforts that you feel the city of Cincinnati or at least partners in Cincinnati can be doing to further promote not only tech, but Black tech as well?
So I think that we just need to do a better job of making certain that all organizations focused on entrepreneurship for the Black community have capacity. And so that they have enough capital to do the work that they need to, so that they're not always working from a scarcity mindset and with scarcity just in general. Because if you don't have enough money to run your company, you can't help people at the level that you need to.
Agreed.
If you don't have enough money for your company, you don't have enough money to hire the people that need to be hired to help
To do the
entrepreneurs,
work.
right? So we have lots of Black-serving, minority-serving organizations here in town, but they can't do the work that needs to be done to get Black companies, minority-led companies, to the next level. And so, yes, it is important to support Black tech, but I think in general, we need to be supporting Black entrepreneurship in Cincinnati. And eventually, we'll get to all things.
Right on, right on. I love it, I love it, I love it. So, guys, we're getting to a little bit closer, to our Q&A portion for the evening. But we're going to have a Q&A, and it's going to be more so open dialogue. But before we get there, I want to preface this with a couple questions that we want you guys to be thinking about in the meantime. So for the audience, of course, the first question is, what is your role in the tech space, if you have one? And how do you identify? And then what have you heard, or what is needed or missing in this space? What gift, skill, or resource or relationship might you be able to bring to the space? What is your next best step, to affect change in the tech space? And then with whom will you take this next step? Because we all know great things aren't done alone. We usually have to partner. So what are the next steps to take that on? And so be thinking of those, and then we'll open up for Q&A here. But I got a couple more questions for our guests before we do that. And so as you guys briefly reflect on your tech journey, right? And so thank you for sharing how you got to this space. Is there anything that surprised you? And then what advice would you give your younger self?
there anything that surprised me in tech?
In your journey, excuse me, is there anything that surprised you in your journey? What, and then what advice would you give to your younger self?
One thing I will say is I thought that people had it a lot more figured out than what they actually do. And when I realized that, it was incredibly empowering. Like, incredibly empowering. Because you're like, you know what? I do belong here. And, like, I might have a couple questions here, a couple questions there, but so does everyone else. And I feel like that just helped me build a ton of confidence that was, like, necessary to, like, push forward and take some of those next steps that were needed, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I resonate with that. No, I can't tell you how many times I felt like, you know, I don't belong here. And I was just like, but wait, everyone else has the same questions I do. So we're all learning together. It's good. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's surprising is, at least here in Cincinnati, people are willing to like have coffee with you. Maybe just in general in tech, people are willing to let you pick their brain. And you can ask anyone anything, and most people are willing to spend their time with you.
Sure.
And they don't feel like they're above that.
Yeah.
And so if you have a well thought out plan and you brush shoulders with someone enough times, they will take the meeting.
Yeah.
At a certain point, they're like, okay,
I keep
I
running
want you
into
off
you.
my shoulder, right? So yeah, I think that's one thing that's surprising. And what would I tell my younger self? Someone's asked me this before, and it's just that, you know, girl, you're gonna make it through it. Because it was, I didn't have the easiest childhood, and that you're gonna make it to the other side of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. Well, thank you guys so much, one, for the conversation. Thank you so much for the insight. And absolutely, I want to encourage everyone here in the audience as well as those listening online, tune in, or, well, it's a little late now. I was going to say register for Black Tech Week. They just sold out of everything today, so kudos to the
We
Black
are out
Tech
of
Week
tickets,
team.
but there's a waiting list.
There's a waiting list, thank you. So get on that waiting list to be involved with all the Black Tech events. But right now we're gonna open up for Q&A, and so if you guys have questions, please raise your hand. We've got Candice and Chandler here to answer those for you. I know we had a couple questions earlier, so just simply raise your hand and we'll bring a mic to you. Anyone? Please, my gentleman in the back.
I came in a little late, but Chandler, I know you were talking about your organization and you like work with Black tech companies and things like that. What do you do exactly?
Yeah, so we help people get their first jobs in tech, regardless of what their academic or professional background is.
All right, second follow-up question,
Okay,
thank
yeah.
you. So do you help people find like developers and things like that?
Yep, definitely. So we've got a community of over 30,000 software engineers. And so, you know, we'll work with large enterprises. Typically, that's a better fit for us because most of our talent is entry level, right? This is going to be their first job. And when you think about the organization that's the best type of organization to support someone who's entry level, it's not going to be a startup, right, where things are super fast moving. You're probably going to have more responsibilities than you initially thought you were going to come in with, right? That's something that's going to be hard for someone's confidence as they're new. It's going to be hard for them to meet the expectations that, you know, their team wants. Whereas when you come into a large enterprise, right, those big companies, they've got training programs, right? Like you get paired up with a mentor, you know, the expectation for you to actually like produce may not be months down the road. And so typically we'll work with large enterprises, but we have placed people in startups as well. Yeah, definitely.
I have a question from the audience, the virtual audience. Alton asks, how can college students capitalize on different opportunities, jobs, internships, et cetera, while using tech?
Can you ask Alan where he goes to school? That would be awesome. Look, internships are worth it. I think college internships, I know for myself, I learned how to consult in college. That was what we did as my fellowship in college. We went into businesses. We learned all the ins and outs of the organization. We kind of tore apart each department and learned what the building blocks were of each company. Any internship is going to teach you a set of building blocks that you'll need for your own future. Get as many as you can. That's just like building a business. So I love to invest in founders who've done it a few times. That can even include their lemonade stand when they were a kid, because it gives you an at-bat. Internships are going to give you an at-bat for your future career.
Yeah.
I'd love to maybe just add a little bit here as well.
Turn your mic on.
Check your mic.
Okay. Yeah,
it.
there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I think also when you are at a certain stage in your life, folks are going to be incredibly willing to help you. Candice talked about this before we went into this particular Q&A, right, about just being surprised how often people were willing to take meetings and just sit down and help out. Thank you. And, as a young person, right, like, folks are even more incentivized to help you out because, like, this person's young and they're reaching out and they're energetic, they're enthusiastic. I want to be a part of this. So I even look at my own fundraising journey, and in our round, all but less than 20% of the capital came from folks that I had connected with while I was an undergrad, whether it was to talk to them about, speaking engagement, whether it was to talk to them about a potential internship or job opportunity, whether it was just to learn more about the space and the sector. And so as a young person, like as a student, this is the best time for you to shoot your shot literally at anyone who you admire. And you never know like what that could turn into in terms of just like a relationship.
Yeah, and one other thing is our current director of programming for Lightship, she started with us as an intern from the University of Cincinnati. At the time, and still today, the state of Ohio offers a match for students. And so they paid half of her wage. We paid the other half. Actually, they paid 75% of her wage. We paid a quarter of it. And that was in 2018. And she's been with us 4 years now.
Yeah.
She had a very small stint that she wasn't with us. And she does very well for herself. We just recently hired our second intern after her first year. And this is her first job out of college.
Beautiful.
And so you just never know where that internship's going to take you.
Yeah.
Companies are trying to capture people younger and younger. If you look at any Fortune 500 right now, they're trying to go to middle school. So if you think that there's believe me. Oh yeah, I'm on the board of the Cincinnati Innovation District.
yeah,
They are
you know,
not playing
yeah.
with the Cincinnati public school
Ooh,
system.
can we talk about the Cincinnati Innovation District?
Sure.
Since you
While
brought
we're
it up.
talking about schools, Alton did have a response for Candice. Xavier University, go Muskies. Was
Oh, yeah.
Alton's response.
That's right, that's right.
Love it. Love it. So, no, I just want to talk about the Cincinnati Innovation District because, well, one, I've seen kind of like pictures and everything, but like, let's talk about the opportunity that it's bringing to the city of Cincinnati, where the partnership came out of, where is it exactly, just for those who don't know.
Yeah, so the Cincinnati Innovation District is the first innovation district that has been funded by the state of Ohio. So it's through Jobs Ohio and through Ohio Third Frontier. They've put in some state dollars, so government dollars, and private dollars to build an innovation district between 71 and 75. So from Cincinnati State all the way to the Martin Luther King interchange. And within that area, it's where our new innovation is supposed to grow. So for us in Cincinnati, it'll end up going from the banks all the way just north of the University of Cincinnati. On that board sits a lot of our large companies, so Kroger, Procter & Gamble, Fifth Third, JP Morgan Chase, obviously the hospital systems are there involved as well. And we're building an area where people can live, work, and play in the same space, also being mindful of the people who have lived in that neighborhood previously.
Absolutely.
So that's really a huge portion of the work. There are a lot of building projects happening in that area. So the first building that went up was 1819 Innovation Hub. That's where all of the corporations sit. So Kroger's there, Fifth Third, we've got a logistics company, all sorts of different organizations within that building, and that's where we all discuss future projects.
Absolutely.
There's two new buildings that are just going up right now. The Digital Futures Building 1 and 2 will come online in the next 30 days or so. Our building will come online in Q2 of 2023, so Beacon, our Lightship headquarters, will be in that space as well, but over time there will be additional spaces that'll grow. Because if you look at other states, that have similar things, innovation districts. Pennsylvania has done a fantastic job of building these, and it's a great place for job growth to happen.
Yes, yes.
And so for us, and we're a little behind, right? Because other places have been doing it for quite some time.
Yeah.
But for us, it'll be a great place to grow jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important to, one, not only talk about, but also recognize as we talk about, tech in the future of Cincinnati. So we're actually bringing to the forefront things that are actually happening, right? Real life things that we can see happening here in this city of Cincinnati. So that's awesome. Thank you. Any more questions?
Karen?
Yes, okay.
Where do the 54 plus fit within the tech world if you've had no tech experience?
We have placed people in their first tech jobs as old as 72. And so I say fit right in. I think that every person, right, when they're stepping into a new sector, when they're stepping into a new opportunity, they've got to think about what makes them special. And there is a level of lived experience and professionalism that you will have from just being on this earth that the tech industry could really, use a little bit of. And you step into the right organization, and that's something that will be like very appreciated and sought after. And so, I'll even say like within our team, right, like people talk about startups, and there's this thought of like a bunch of like young guys in a garage. And when I look at what has been the greatest stabilizing force on our team, it has been the oldest individual on our team, the most experienced individual on our team, and so, and he's someone who did not start his career in tech, but moved into tech later in his career, as well. And so, is there a place? Definitely.
Yeah, two people in our portfolio, two of our founders are over 50. One of the most successful is over 55. And they've done it a few times, and we respect that. Older people on our team are well respected, and as somebody in her mid-40s, I feel like that's not far from where I'm at.
Also, the thing that I'll say is, I think sometimes we look at technology as this just like big abstract thing that's like hard to wrap our heads around. But a lot of times they're like tools to help make like a business more efficient or a process more efficient. And so if there's an area where you have a lot of understanding, like maybe you understand a lot about healthcare because you've spent most of your career there, or a lot about hospitality because you've spent most of your career there, and you go to a technology company that's in that space, you're going to be able to come in and understand what's going on, because this is just the tool that's making the business be able to be more efficient and more effective.
Great.
Candice, I have a question from Karen and Greg Simpson online. Candice discussed the need to provide adequate resources to organizations helping Black entrepreneurs. What organizations are in that space in Cincinnati?
Oh, what organizations are providing resources? So the members of a consortium called Lincoln and Gilbert. That includes Mortar, Lightship, the African American Chamber, the Urban League, the Minority Business Accelerator. And so there's a website for Lincoln and Gilbert. You can find out more about those companies there. We work together 2 to 3 times a month, making certain that we are doubling the number of Black-owned businesses in Cincinnati over the next 5 years. So we have a strategic vision as a group to make certain that we're doing that work together.
Hi. Did either of you have mentors on your path to success? And if so, what advice or how did those mentors play a role in how you got to where you're at now?
Great question.
I will say yes, definitely. I mean, I'm sitting with some of my mentors here. And so, I mean, like at the end of the day, I feel like you cannot have and be what you cannot see. And I've had so many people in my life. Like I think about when I was in college, I started interning at a venture capital firm my junior year for free, 20 hours a week. But the individual who ran that firm, he was very big on the use of capital, not just for like economic development and growth, but like making the world and people's lives better, right? And so my lens that I look at technology through was very much shaped through that first experience that I had. I think even when I talk about, Candice here and Brian here and how they've been helpful to me in my own trajectory, right? I think a lot of times you think, oh, I can reasonably do things this fast, or I can reasonably hit this in this time frame. And the conversation was always, how can we break past that? You know? And so being able to have those people that have been there, that have done that have seen it, have seen what it looks like in people who have done it, to be able to encourage you, to be able to tell you, okay, maybe this might not make the most sense, but here's another way to look at things. Like, that's so valuable in every area of life, and I feel like this is no different. You know?
Yeah, and you may not label them mentor, right? It could be just that person that's helping, and you recognize over time that that's actually what they're doing. I mean, I've had several of those. I think you also have to recognize that sometimes your mentor doesn't know what's best for you, and that they may fail in certain areas. So you have to be able to follow your own true north, because they might be wrong. You have to be able to filter and decipher what's right and what's wrong with a mentor.
Hi, thank you. Can you provide insight into monetizing a business that is geared toward the underserved community, people that may not be able to pay?
So I feel like I'm in a great position to answer that one, because we don't charge any of the people that we work with, you know, to bring them through the training or the job placement piece. But at the end of the day, you're providing value to multiple parties, right? Yes, I'm providing value to the individual that's getting trained, that's getting the job. But also, the schools need people to go through their training programs, right? And so they'll pay us, right? Because we're bringing candidates through their programs, right? The employers, they need people to make their companies and businesses run, so they'll pay us, right? And so there's always a value exchange, right? And so understanding, like, within that value exchange, who is the person who has the highest willingness and ability to pay? And for the most part, that's never going to be the individual person that you're looking to serve. That's probably going to be like a larger organization, a business, or an entity. And so I think, you know, there are so many business models where we can help each other out and make a lot of money without asking each other for money, like, at all.
I'm going to also add, though, it is okay to make money, right? It is okay to look for a model that will make money with people who will pay, and then after, build something for people who can't pay. I've met so many black women who want to help the community. We have big hearts, right? But you have to build something of value to maybe do that later. That may be your own philanthropy. You may have something else great to build, and this might be that one great thing that makes money. It's okay to make money. It's okay to rise to a different level. It's okay to let people see you make money. You can't be fearful of money. It is hard to make, and it's hard to let people watch you make it. But over time, you can really do something amazing for others if you make enough.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like Candice has been this in so many people's life, because it's like you have resources to deploy to people, right? Like, my life changed when we went and raised our round of funding.
Tell them about your round of funding.
Well, can you explain what funding rounds are for those who may not know?
Yeah, definitely. So for a lot of technology companies, there is an expectation to grow at a certain rate, right? Because you've got something that everyone in the world can see and touch. And so there are folks who want to help you grow because they will be able to make more money than almost anyone else can in such a short period of time. And so those folks are called venture capitalists. Some in the earlier stages will even be called angel investors, right? And so when a lot of people start technology companies, they'll build out a small product, right? Be able to get a little bit of traction, show that there's a business that's working around it, and then they'll approach these investors and say, hey, here's my vision for the next 10 years. And I will tell you, even just myself stepping into this world as a younger person, my mind was blown initially. And so to even just talk about, you know, my funding round, we closed a funding round that we announced this past February of $2.1 million. We raised from all black managed funds and black angel investors. And so with that being said, right, it's like that 2.1 sounds like a lot of money, but that 2.1 is below average in terms of the size of the average seed round. And so, like, I think that's really important to share, just to understand, like, the scale and magnitude, again, right, of these opportunities and some of, like, the growth expectations. And so, yeah, that's the piece of our funding round we were able to raise from all black investors. And the whole point, right, is you sell the company, and folks are selling companies for billions of dollars, right? Like, not millions, but billions. And we've got these folks who have already shown us when they get their hands on money, they're going to go support black folks. And so if we go in and sell the company for billions of dollars, then now there's a bunch of folks who have already shown us that they're going to go support black folks, who have also gotten even wealthier off of this and now have even more power and ability to do so.
Yeah, but just know that we want our money back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
And not just our money back. Like, if I give you $1 million, I want at least $2 million back, at least. And that is failing if you do 2 times.
Yeah, we're
right?
trying to 100x it, yeah.
Yeah.
1000x.
If we can get 10 to 100, we are in good shape. If we hit 5, okay, right? I want a lot more than I gave you.
Yes.
Because I have to give 80% of that to my LPs, right? To my own investors.
I work for a automotive software company here, based in Chicago, but we have a big presence here in Cincinnati. And one interesting thing that you talked about is that we used to be ran more like automotive companies where, you know, General Motors, the Chryslers, they live and die by, you know, finance and covering expenses and making sure. But now our new CEO sees us as a software as a service. So we're more run like a technology company. So you can even find yourself in a situation where you're working for a company that's one way, somebody comes in, all of a sudden you're a technology company. You know, that's the way our new CEO, he came from Intel to our company, so he's changing the whole culture. And the real point I wanted to make was you talked about not kind of having technology background, being technology. I have a niece and a nephew who, my nephew just left Salesforce and went to Meta, and he was an international business or something, and my niece just left her company, and both of them work at Meta now, but in different areas, and she has a degree in Spanish.
Yep.
So you just don't know that technology, where you can fit in and where you can be in the technology companies, and don't limit yourself just by kind of what you majored in.
Yeah, and I wonder how much your CEO has been affected by the fact that he's now leading in public. So 20 years ago, any CEO, yes, of course, they put out their reports and they put out, you know, SEC filings and things were in the newspaper. Now, day to day, their leadership is being looked at under the microscope of Twitter, right? And so if they're not moving things daily, it's not working any longer. And so the old way of doing business doesn't work. And some companies move too slowly, right? If we think about our companies here in town, we've got some really large companies. And if we look at their competitors, some of their competitors visually look like they're moving a lot faster, right? And so they're all under this constant scrutiny. So I wonder if that's why he's made some shifts.
Thank you.
Nelson from our online community has asked, what can someone outside of the tech sector do to advance equity in the industry as a citizen, an advocate, a consumer?
I would say that, and it just depends on who they are, but I mean, we need more black investors. That's always a great place to start. We need more women investors. And so that's something that anyone can do. You can start your own investment group. I think also just starting earlier with children, giving them the opportunity that Chandler was talking about. It's a long-term play, but it's an important one to make. You know, my husband's in the front row. He started coding when he was 8 years old. He is where he is today because his dad brought a computer home and said, hey kid, like this is the future. And so sometimes it takes decades to yield the fruit that you need. But I think that that's definitely one thing that somebody can do.
I'd say, like with anything, right, if you want to make it better, right, if you want to make it in a way that is a safer space for you, like the easiest way to do that is to get involved. And so, right, like that's to Candice's point, is to get involved, whether that's you as a parent, you know, equipping your children, whether that's you as a person who has some curiosity and some interest and maybe overcoming some of those initial apprehensions, right, to dive in and to learn and educate yourself. And one piece that I think I don't want to skip over, right? I want to give like a tangible example of what getting involved and making things better actually looks like, right? And so, Candice mentioned, that her husband Brian started coding when he was 8. One thing that she didn't mention, right, was that, he went and built a facial recognition software company. And facial recognition software is something that has been used in ways that honestly has been weaponized against black and brown people. And it's like, oh, someone has the skill set to be able to build something better in the space, then they will build it better for themselves and for all of us. And so that getting involved piece, it sounds good, but when you actually look at like what it means, it's like these are the things that can actually like change life outcomes for people. So yeah.
That's awesome. More questions? No? Well, I have a question, just for everybody out there. Who are people that we should be following or keeping track with in the tech space? Is there a page? Is there a certain personality that people can follow or tap into to stay informed and to stay up to date?
Don't follow personalities.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that noted as well.
Yeah. I feel like there are a lot of great resources. I feel like Twitter is a very hit or miss space, right? Okay. Within Twitter, you have a lot of individuals who have achieved high levels of success within technology, and they put out great content, for you where you can learn, you can go in the right direction to know where you should start learning from. But then you also have a lot of folks that are just kind of elevating self.
Influencers.
Yeah.
But I think that, I'm shameless plug here, but if you're looking for resources, right, to get into tech, visit us at joinbootup.com. That's basically what we do, right? Like, we'll help you figure out how to get into cybersecurity. We'll help you figure out how to get into data science, software engineering, design, tech sales, customer success, like whatever that interest in tech is for you. We'll help direct you to the right program. And then from there, right, like everyone has different needs. And so, maybe you want to do tech sales, right? Maybe you need a part-time program. Maybe you need an in-person program. Maybe you need a virtual program. We'll help you figure out all of those things for yourselves. And so, obviously, I'd love for folks to come check us out, but I think, you do have a ton of other resources online that you can tap into as well.
Yeah, I would say follow great journalists.
Okay.
Great journalists know how to actually vet a story and vet a company.
Yes.
There are some amazing writers at Protocol. There's a great writer at TP Insights or The Plug, Sherelle Dorsey. I think that Tanisha Carr from Inc. magazine, who runs a section of the magazine called All the Hats, covers black women in entrepreneurship. And so if you follow a great journalist, you'll find the truth.
Yes.
As long as you find a truthful journalist.
Noted. Well, awesome. Were there any more questions from the
Yes,
audience?
Nelson Online actually had a similar question to yours, Tim. Is there a good list of black-owned tech firms we can prioritize when our orgs or companies are looking to contract tech solutions?
Oh, like through supplier diversity? That is not my space.
Yeah. Not
That is
mine
not
either.
my space.
Yeah, mine either.
The Plug, TP Insights, The Plug, the young lady who runs that organization is called, her name is Sherelle Dorsey.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our Q&A portion of the evening. And so what we're going to do now for about 10 to 15 minutes is break out into small groups. And so all that I ask is that you count off by, we're all adults here, so 4 to 5 people in each group. But the questions that I prefaced with earlier, we're just going to kind of turn in, have about a 10 to 15-minute conversation, and then briefly share out. If you're looking for printouts, we have some over here. If you want to hand out to people, please. Yeah, please. Oh my gosh, Candice, please, let's talk about that. One more thing.
Real quick.
Yeah.
We are hosting a job fair from 1 to 4 p.m. on Friday, July 22nd at Washington Park, rain location of Memorial Hall. There will be 20 to 40 companies represented, all hiring in the tech field. No, it's just jobs in general. It's just jobs in general.
Okay.
So Kroger and Kroger Digital, Eli Lilly, Fifth Third Bank, PNC Bank, lots of others will be represented. If you follow us at blacktechweek.com, you can find out more about that. we would love for you to kind of just upload your resume, but you can also just show up to Washington Park that day.
Awesome. Thank you
you.
so much. I appreciate that.
blacktechweek.com.
Awesome. Okay, great. Anyone need a set of questions? You did just fine. You're fine. Now, if you guys feel comfortable, feel free to join one of the groups out here. You don't have to, but please.